Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, August 23rd. This is a Prescott City Council workshop meeting. So we'll have roll call, please.
Mayor Good.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Councilman Montoya.
Here.
Councilman Moore.
Here.
Councilman Sishka.
Here.
And Councilman Tenney.
Yes, ma'am.
All are present.
Very good. This workshop is primarily for the interview of the final candidates for appointment to the open seat on the Prescott City Council. However, we will start the meeting with a ratification action. City Clerk, you want to read that?
Ratification of action described below is taken by council following executive session on Tuesday, August 16th, 2022.
So the reason we're bringing this forward is we had an executive session where we reviewed all the applications for candidates for the open seat. And at the conclusion of that executive session, we had probably a 30-second action to select the 4 finalists. So because it was listed as a public action, we decided to go ahead and ratify the action that we are referencing from the Tuesday, August 16th, 2022 meeting. So I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I'll move to ratify motion by Councilman Montoya to select Constance Cantelmi, Thomas Riley, Stephen Schmidt, and Gerald Strickland as the 4 finalists for council vacancy and move forward with the interview questions as presented by the city clerk.
Second. Motion is second. Please vote.
Councilman Sishka.
Yes.
Thank you. Passes 6-0.
All right, now we'll move into the interview process here. We have a series of questions that are going to be asked by the council, and we'll probably do a round-robin type of process where each council member will have a chance to ask one of the series of questions to each one of the candidates. After we've completed the 3 current candidates, and City Clerk, do you want to mention the other issue, that the 4th candidate?
Yes. So council was notified yesterday that finalist Gerald Strickland withdrew his candidacy. So we will only be interviewing Connie Cantelmi, Tom Riley, and Stephen Schmidt today. Council was also notified of the total comments received from the public regarding the finalists during the public comment period. In total, the city clerk's office received 20 comments from the public, 16 of which were specific endorsement for Connie Cantelmi, 2 for Stephen Schmidt, 1 for Gerald Strickland. And the city council assistant also received 1 public comment, which was for endorsement of Connie Cantelmi as well. And that's all the updates I have for you, Mayor.
Very good. So I think at the end of this 3 rounds of interviews with the current candidates, I will entertain comments from the public. So if anybody in the chamber wants to address the council on their concerns or support or potentially opposition to any of the 3 candidates, you can fill out one of those blue comment cards and hand it to the city clerk, and you'll have a chance to make your comments at the end of the 3 rounds of interviews. So with that said, Constance Cantelmi, you're up.
You can call me Connie.
Thank you, Connie.
That's a mouthful. And I always know it's my family calling me when they answer, Constance, are you home? The rest of the time it's Connie.
Yeah,
Anyway,
probably
thank you very much for inviting me here today, Mayor, Council, Mr. Lamar, Mr. Young. I think I've met pretty much all of you and seen you around town in different things that we've been involved in, all of us, for many, many, many years. Anyway, I'm not sure the format here, but I'm going to go ahead and start out and read the question just for the benefit of the audience. Is that okay with you?
I think the process will be each council member will ask one of the questions of you,
Okay?
and then you can respond to that. So you have been given the questions and prepared your comments. That's great. So we'll start off with Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question, and this is one that I think is probably top of mind for a lot of people, is growth and development. Prescott is a growing city facing issues related to available workforce housing. Please speak to your knowledge of the concepts of smart/managed growth and workforce housing and how these concepts can be applied in our community.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, it's right up my alley. So my definition has pretty much always been for smart growth, that is, that as a city or municipality, we have to kind of stay ahead of the curve, and we have, obviously a duty to provide to these big planned area developments essential services, roads, infrastructure, that sort of thing. So first I'm going to address that. I believe that each one of these large developments or even the smaller projects need to be addressed on a case-by-case basis. One shoe does not fit all. Several things need to be taken into consideration, again, as the city has a responsibility to provide essential services to these developments. So the question is, who pays for the extra infrastructure, police, and fire that will be required? Who pays to maintain the roads and the infrastructure? Does the project generate enough reoccurring revenue in the form of taxes to support itself? And how do we accomplish this? So do we adopt something widely known as the village concept? I don't know if anybody's aware of that. It's been practiced for years down in the valley, for example, Scottsdale. The theory with the village concept is that you have a planned area development, and generally you've got an area of attached commercial development. And the theory is the tax that comes from the commercial development that would be filled in with essential items like grocery stores and churches would provide the tax base to support them and maintain the planned area developments. I see that a little bit, in some of the areas, maybe in the newer areas in Prescott Valley. This was also an attempt to try to keep people off the roads because obviously the things they want to do is go grocery shopping, go to church on Sunday, and if they have all of that in their so-called village area, they're more likely to stay within their area. So, but the biggest thing of all is the tax money that comes off the commercial and also the residential would help offset the municipalities in taking care and maintaining of these areas. So I do believe that's very important, and I think it's a negotiating point. Way back when the developers come in front of you with a planned area development, there are a few things that we can negotiate, and that's being one of them. I've seen a community not too far from us that actually instituted a small tax inside of an HOA fee, and that money that was collected, on a monthly basis would go to the city into the general fund. And again, this does kind of, help offset the maintenance of especially the roads. Some areas we've been able to get the developers to be able to take care of their own roads. They become private roads within the development. I think that's another negotiating tool. I don't see that happening a lot up here, but I do think it's important, especially as these developments starts to age, because replacing roads, as we all know, is a very, very expensive venture, and we've already got so many to, be able to take care of right now in the city. I want to talk about the subject of workforce housing. This is an interesting topic. And coming again from the construction industry and as an investor myself, I have a different perspective on this subject. It's widely held that workforce housing is subsidized by the municipality in which they exist. I've never heard anybody expressing an interest that the city is interested in becoming a landlord. Does the city want to subsidize this type of housing? Do we have the funds available to do this? I'm proposing that this needs to be called affordable housing. And I've seen these words used interchangeably, but it's a very different concept when you're talking about subsidized housing and workforce housing. I would rather see it on the private sector and become affordable housing. But that's a difficult thing when you live in a community like we do that's so highly sought after as Prescott, Arizona is. We know in the field as an investor it's only affordable the first time. And then how do these builders make it affordable? Generally there's a cut down in building products. They want to do less application on the exterior, so you end up with these sort of the boring stucco boxes. Do we really want that? I mean, there's a lot of issues that need to come into play when you're talking about the affordability of workforce housing and how do you get there. Land acquisition, of course, everything the city, the development department makes a builder go through, that can add up. We've just recently had a bunch of code changes asking more from the builder. Many of those were substantiated, some were not, but this is all a cost. I know in my company, my construction company, I did for years, I bid blueprints. And depending upon the project, if it's a custom, large custom, where it's located, the popularity of the area, these costs can vary a lot. And so, but do we, there's an example down in the valley called Maryvale. When John F. Long built that, it was supposed to be workforce housing. Well, fast forward now, 50 years later, because the building materials were really scrimped down on, they used a lot of T111 and siding, which does not age well. Now you've created kind of a slum area. So we do have to kind of be careful of that here in Prescott. So when that word workforce housing is applied, we have to figure out how to get to the affordable part of that workforce housing.
Thank you, Connie. We'll move to the next question on public safety. I'll take this one. There are a number of current societal challenges, example, social unrest, community distrust, etc., facing law enforcement entities throughout our country. As such, how would you suggest here locally, the city, and more specifically the police department, address these challenges?
Well, first of all, let me say I completely support the police department and the fire department. We have an amazing group of young guys up in this and women in this area. I've met a lot of them. To be a successful and safe city, we must support and take care of our public safety personnel. There are ways to make this happen, but the number one thing, and it always, always, always comes down to money. We've got to pay them appropriately. And we've got to give them incentives for raises. If we incentivize this program, I think we're going to be much more successful in retaining. I happen to know right now, especially in our police department, we have other municipalities trying to take our police away from us. And they're offering bonuses, large bonuses. If you're a young family with a few kids, that looks mighty attractive to be able to leave here and go to another area where you're making a lot more money. I think we need to be at the top of the pay scale to attract and maintain these guys. This is a way for the community to show them that we value them and that we want them to have a good life. This is not an easy job, and I know this firsthand. My son is a firefighter. I have a nephew that's a policeman. Both of these have young families. They've both struggled to keep a roof over their head. They make an average on $27 an hour to put their life on the line for us, stay up all hours of the night. That's ridiculous. They've got to be paid a little bit more, and we've got to figure out a way to come up with some money to be able to retain this here. We've lost several police and fire to other communities because we just don't pay enough. I've heard that we are understaffed in the police department, and this should be corrected as soon as possible. This is one of the most important issues that keep our communities safe and for everybody that lives here. It truly is essential. In addition, I support a regional effort for potentially one large complex in North Prescott. We all see the growth. It's happening before our very eyes. The lines between Prescott Valley and Chino Valley and Prescott are blurring as we speak. If we were able to build one large complex for both fire and police in North Prescott, I think that would be a really good asset for all of us in this whole community and for a regional effort, by the way. I don't know what it's going to cost, but I do think we should start moving and looking towards that to happen, because otherwise, when these 10,500 homes actually get built, along with some of the other stuff that's happening in, Prescott Valley, we've got Jasper and, Granville and all the other. We need to keep those response times very low. That's essential. We're a retirement community. So I think we do need to kind of look towards that, support them. And it is going to cost a little bit of money, but I just don't see how we can afford not to do that, just to keep our community as wonderful as it really is. I was, in 2017, I actually ran for this very seat, and I was lucky enough to go on a ride-along with a policeman. And I got to tell you, I was shocked. From the minute I got in that car at 2 o'clock in the afternoon till the time I left at 8 o'clock, he didn't sit down. We drove from one end of the city to the other, and just go, go, go. He didn't even get time to stop for a donut that I offered to buy. But, so Are they severely understaffed? Yes. But these guys have got a heart of gold, and they work so hard for us. They're up all night long watching out for us as we're sleeping. So anyway, I do want to encourage the council to get on board and maybe research this issue and get them paid a little bit more money so we can keep our local guys here. And again, we're going to attract a whole different caliber of person. The amount of money we spend on training, a lot of these municipalities are attracting these policemen and fire that have years of experience. Do we want to give that up? I don't think so. We spend a lot of money training these guys, so we definitely want to keep them here.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. The next question's on economic development. What is your definition of economic development, and how would you define the city's role in this regard? And what are this community's strengths, weaknesses in terms of both business attraction, and retention?
Well, my definition of economic development within the city is attracting businesses that will contribute to our tax base and be a good fit for our citizens and our community. Our community's strengths are a wonderful combination of a desired quality of life, great educational institutions, fabulous weather, a good workforce, a wonderful tourism industry, and a very sought-after area to live in. We also possess a large population of retirees, as I referred to earlier, that want to be able to take advantage of our businesses, restaurants, and other amenities. Some of our weaknesses are our inability to retain our brain power that graduate every semester from one of our 5 learning institutions. We must take the time needed to figure out ways to retain this population of people. This age group is our future. The city has been involved in making moves to be able to offer this millennial group of citizens a path forward and a future here in Prescott. After all, it does cost money to live here. We've got to make sure that we provide for them. A great example is the Center for the Future, or the Prescott Regional Opportunity Foundation, which is commonly called the PROF. I have completely supported this foundation, led by Dr. John Haas of Embry-Riddle, since its inception. Just as I realized early on this was going to be a win-win for the city and could be a step toward keeping our brain power, and it's actually worked. This is the kind of thing that builds on itself. That attraction here, paying them a good wage, we've just got to provide some housing for them, keeping them here, because once they get here, especially the millennials, the things they love to do, we have. The outdoor amenities, the hiking, the boating, then we've got the restaurants, we've got pretty much a burgeoning nightlife, although I would never know because I go to bed at 9:30. But we are actually giving this crowd of people what they need. We've invited, over the years, a few people, like Ron Drake came here, did a study of, he's a man from I think he has a show called Flip This Town. I remember whispering to you, I could have told you all that stuff, and you wouldn't have had to pay me. No, but we're working on that, and I think we're making strides, and the Center for the Future is a perfect example of that. And in order to be able to keep and retain these young adults, we must first offer them a way to make a good income. The foundation is the way for the future. Dr. Haas tells me there are currently 550,000 unfilled jobs in this country in cybersecurity. In addition, we are facing extreme pilot shortage. Prescott is poised to be able to be a contributor in these areas in a big way. And I do applaud the City of Prescott for its support of the Prescott Regional Opportunity Foundation. The airport expansion is another wonderful economic driver. I wanted to read real quick, just let me grab it here, right here. I'm not sure if I'm going to get asked this, but I'm going to kind of talk about it a little bit earlier. So just a few weeks ago, I was able to interview Dr. Robin Sabata, the director of the airport, and I did a little research, as I always do, for my little radio shows. Did you know that the airport is a really big economic driver? And wait till you hear these numbers. The airport brings in $194 million to our community every year. The airport currently employs 1,223 people. Did you know that 90% of all travelers to the airport come from Yavapai County? Which is very surprising to me. The airport use is expected to increase by 11% in the next 3 years. Now, did you know that there were 311,000 takeoffs and landings in 2021? But that number was actually exceeded in 1997. I'm not sure what was going on in 1997, but those landings and takeoffs exceeded 355,000. That's a lot. We're the 18th largest airport in the country, by the way. But did you know, here's one question. Did you know that there have been 86 crashes in those impact zones since 1928? That's something we've got to remember, and I'll address that a little bit later as we may possibly get into the airport.
Councilman Tenney, I think she probably took half of the answer to your question, but go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Not at all. I think you've got the questions in front of you, so you probably knew that the airport was coming up very next.
Oh, I didn't, but...
Prescott Regional Airport, it's got the code here, in fact, for us. In case you want to know, the airport code is PRC. And the question, Connie, is this. And you've, as the mayor just mentioned, you've touched on some of these pieces already, so good segue. Thank you for that. Please articulate your understanding of how to protect the growing capacity and operations of the Prescott Regional Airport, and how to balance that with development in the areas surrounding the airport.
Well, I have some ideas of that. Having worked with developers in the past, many of them on a consultation basis for layout, creative ways to provide retention ponds, ingress, egress. There's rules, you know, in the building industry covering every inch of every one of these subjects. I do think that, and I do understand, you know, I recognize the issues with the developers, the landlords, and the city concerning the AVO. I recognize that there were contracts on both sides, but I believe that some of these issues may be able to be solved with an open mind, a little creativity, and a rework of the planned area development by the developers and their designers, so that both sides can come up with a new plan in those impact zones, those designated areas. By no means are we asking to go back and have a redraw of the whole planned area development. We're just talking about the impact zones and the expansion of the airport. That can be done, but it's got to be done with a group of people sitting around a table that are willing to have an open mind, so that both parties can leave with a fair and equitable agreement. It can happen. It may cost a little bit more money, but maybe that's a bone the city throws. It can't be that much to redraw some of those plans. So I've laid out some suggestions that could work. Number one, locate commercial warehousing or supply houses to the locations of the impact zones of the airport. These are very seldom, it's mostly for storage. There may be a few people working in some of these warehouses a day, but it's better than having a school full of children in some of those areas. Do we take a chance? As I said earlier, we've had 86 impacts, and we just had one not too long ago. I think it was about a year ago. So this can and will happen, and I do think we need to protect those areas. Sometimes you have to protect people from themselves also, and I think this is going to be a big educating factor. We can reorganize the layout of the community, as I said earlier, to accommodate the impact zones by re-engineering the required open space and retention ponds into those areas. This can be done through a grading and drainage map, or what they call a topo map. There's always a layout of the groundwork done by engineers when a planned area development is actually planned. And it's all of these considerations are taken into effect. You know, there's been a stipulation of making sure that these planned area developments have open space. And many of those are double usage. They are open space, but they are used as retention ponds. With grading, a lot of that water can go down into these retention ponds, and they could very easily be located in these impact zones, along with, you know, of course, some of the commercial things I mentioned earlier. We can use some of these areas for spillover parking for visitors. A lot of the planned area development don't have adequate parking, and so when they have a few visitors or a party, we need to be able to provide that spillover parking. That would be another great area. We can start by relocating the ingress and the egress into the communities, into those impact areas. Cars are in there for just a few minutes as they're traveling through. So, you know, you've got much less of a chance that somebody will get hurt if there is an actual impact. We need to get the city involved for these agreed upon alterations. There could be the possibility of expediting these changes if they involve rezoning, road locations, setback alterations, and anything else that could be amended to protect that area. One of the things I think that this builder, having been there myself, is very concerned with is the time delay. You know, in the business, time is money. If the city were to throw him a bone and say, look, I will expedite this permitting for you. If we need to work on an alteration of a setback, we're going to help you do that expeditiously. The process to getting to an actual permit is a long and arduous. If they think they have to go back to step one, that's going to be a big problem. But has anybody ever verbalized to them that these are the ways that we as a city can help you move forward and make sure that we as a city are protected from this liability? The city could be involved in other problem-solving issues to make these changes quickly, as I just said. And I hope there's an opportunity to explore these things by all concerned parties before we bring in the lawyers, but I guess I understand that's a little too late. But there's always negotiating.
Councilman Moore, you have your next question.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Connie.
Hi.
Next question is on water and wastewater. Please articulate your perspective and understanding as it pertains to the city's current water portfolio and current water policy.
Well, I've heard this line quoted in council a few years ago, and it's stuck in my head because it's so true. Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. And I think we all know that. That is an issue that has been around in Arizona in general for a long time. We do live in a desert, even though we are in a high desert. I stand before you, as we have recently learned, just how much more Arizona's Colorado River allocation will be cut to the state of Arizona. Thankfully, while Prescott does not have any allocation from this finite resource, we are still very concerned about our water security, which is the future of our community. I could easily spend hours talking to you about our water portfolio, our current water policy, but lucky for you, I only have a few minutes to address. Thankfully, Prescott has been and will continue to be a leader in the water management within the state of Arizona. In fact, Governor Bruce Babbitt just spoke last week at the Citizens Water Advocacy Group. By the way, I'm really glad for the first time to see the city forming, partnership, if you will, with CWAG. They've got some expertise, and as I've said on many of my shows, Prescott's an amazing community. We have so many smart, intelligent people that have come here to retire, and they want to give back. And so we can benefit from a lot of that knowledge by listening to these people that are obviously possess a lot of knowledge in this field. It would be foolish of us, actually, to push them away because these are people that have, spent a lot of time studying in this area over their careers. I think it's very, very important. The recently approved 2022 Water Management Plan continues to protect our water supply with a total of 22 policies to aid in the management of this resource. And while not perfect, this plan revitalizes and refocuses the city's effort even further into the protection and careful distribution of this vital resource. We're fortunate to have two well fields in Chino Valley and one very productive well field in Prescott Regional Airport. Prescott has senior rights to the Big Chino Water Ranch. Not that I'm advocating for that, but that's sort of our what would I call it? We're lucky to have that, and if we need that in the future, that's one thing. I don't think we are quite there yet, but that'll be a little bit of an insurance policy for us, I think, as the decades pass through. This was an excellent investment with great forethought with the original purchase, but I and many others in this community view the Big Chino as our savings account. There you go, all to be tapped as a last resort, and that's true. And then I believe we honor the citizens' wishes with Prop 400, take it to a vote as required by law, and then deal with the other looming legalities with Prescott Valley, SRP, and communities along the Upper Verde. This is a very serious decision not to be taken lightly, and many stakeholders and a price tag in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I would want to collaborate with our staff and CWAG and the community on what would be the best move for that. One of the things, though, with this eventual pipeline, in the process of getting ahead of the curve, I do think we need to have a study about that and put it in place for future. Maybe even potentially, acquire some of the land for that area, because as we've seen recently, prices are going up. I mean, we could have acquired that building down there maybe for 30 to 40% less had we bought it 5-10 years ago. Not that it was on the market, but just as an example of how the property values are rising. So I do think this subject really deserves a lot of study, and maybe put in place a plan for the future, going 20, 30 years out, just to get ahead of the curve and maybe buy some of this property, just for that eventual if we need it.
City Clerk, I'm not sure if Councilman Shishka is online, but he would be able to then ask this last question of the applicant.
He sure is. Go ahead, Councilman Sischka.
I'm here. Hi, Connie. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
So this is about public infrastructure and demands for service, and you've kind of covered that in some of the other questions. But is there anything else that do you see as the city's most urgent infrastructure needs and or service delivery issues?
Well, as you all know, I am a big advocate for our historical areas. And I was very involved in spearheading a couple of the big downtown road projects that we just had. It took me 5 years to get the Washington Goodwin project through to fruition. In the process of that, by the way, as A.L. Miner, who was the contractor who won the award on that project, as I sat there every day, watched this, because again, it's my field and I love to be able to see what they're doing. You couldn't believe the water lines and the gas lines they were pulling out of the ground. I believe that somebody told me that my water line hadn't been replaced in 60 years. You can imagine the corrosion that was on that. Those are one of the things. So, the new developments, the planned area developments are new, and everything you don't see under the ground is also new and will last a long time. But some of the products that we had available to us back, 60 years ago, when this historic area was actually, built, are inferior to what we have today. And I do think we need to start to make a plan, and I think we are. In fact, I was very happy to hear a couple years ago that the city had invested in some software that now rates our road system down here. And so, the road systems are important because along with that, in the historic areas, we have little or no sidewalks. We don't have a lot of water, retention for when we have, these big floods. In fact, my alley right now just flooded out for the 4th time where I live, and I have to access that every day. I'll be on calling you later, actually. No, but I do think for those infrastructure needs right now, we need to protect the historic area because, again, this is a huge draw for our tourism. I don't know how much the latest figure is on tourism, but at one time, I think 50% of our money came from our tourism industry right down here. People don't come here to look at these rows of stucco homes that are being built out there. They come here for Prescott. They come to see our quaint neighborhoods, the way we're preserving our history. It's an emotional thing for these people. I interview a lot of them because I have a vacation rental, and they come here, and I always ask people, why are you here? If it's not an Embry-Riddle draw, because the mommies and daddies like to come and see the kids out at Embry-Riddle. It's always somebody here that just wants to come and see our history, take advantage of our trails or the bike walking. So we do have to really concentrate right now down in this area to make sure we preserve why people come here. So I would have to say, again, living down here, I've always said I live in ground zero. We need a little attention down here for our infrastructure. So I think that's probably, in my mind, again, we do need roads, and we obviously need to watch our water systems. And I know we're dealing with some of the PFAS right now, and I'm going to attempt the polyfluoral alkylide that we found in the wells, but I think that can be mitigated through professionals and filtration systems. But other than that, Mr. Sischka, I'm going to say we need to look at our infrastructure down here in our original township.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Connie. Our time is up right now, so thank you for your application. Thank you for your presentations and answers, and we'll have a decision here within the next hour or so.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We can have Mr. Riley come in now.
Yeah, Martha's bringing him.
Mayor, I'm going to use the restroom super quick. That will be okay.
Just think this is 25% less than it normally would have been.
Yeah, so we got that working for us. Here's Tom.
I assume I just come right up?
Come on up, Tom. Thank you and welcome. As I mentioned before, the council will kind of do a round-robin series of questions, which you've been provided. So each question will have about 5 minutes to get through the 6 questions and your full half hour for this interview process. So since Councilman Montoya started, I guess it's my turn to start on the first question on growth and development. So Prescott is a growing city facing issues related to available workforce housing. Please speak to your knowledge of the concepts of smart managed growth, and workforce housing and how these concepts can be applied to our community.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I think that the councils, your council as well as past councils, have done a pretty good job at managing growth. We've kept it at about 2%, and I think that that's really good. The smart managed growth basically is balancing the needs of home, the demands for housing, the demands for commercial, balancing those things with protecting the environment and also protecting our open space, protecting all those different things. So I think the smart growth balances all those different issues and tries to bring them together in such a way that you can achieve the goals and the values that the city holds, particularly set out in their general plan. And as far as workforce housing is concerned, that's a tricky one. Well, with workforce housing, if it's going to be owner-occupied, the first house is usually the workforce housing, and then 3 or 4 years later, they start earning more money, or they have a family and they need a bigger house. They sell that house. When they sell it, is it still workforce housing? That's going to be one of the issues that needs to be addressed. There are a variety of different ways and different incentives that can be put into place that have been done across the country. Some have been somewhat successful in being able to deal with things like zoning issues, densities, fees, building codes, different things like that in order to be able to address the issues of being able to build fairly inexpensively. And with those things, that's how the city can really help that sort of thing happening. There have been communities that have had by way of density, if you're allowed 10 units and you allow them to do 12 or 13, they would have to agree to perhaps a 20-year moratorium on not selling that house, reselling the house for more than what the CPI might have dictated for the pricing on that. And as far as renting is concerned, renters from workforce housing, and that's a similar issue. Getting the developer or the person who's going to be putting that out there and building it, I think giving them some of the incentives as well, and having them agree to a certain time frame in which they will keep the rents on their own down to a certain level. I think that that's important, and those are some of the things that you can do to be able to address that. You certainly don't want to get into rent control.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. The next question is about public safety issues. There are a number of current societal challenges, i.e. social unrest, community distrust, etc., facing law enforcement entities throughout our country. As such, how would you suggest here locally the city, and more specifically the police department, address these challenges?
First of all, by unrest, I'm assuming that you're referring to some of the defund the police issues that are happening in a variety of cities around the country. And I am probably on the opposite side of that conversation. I think that the police need more funding. And I think that our police department does an excellent job of outreach, community outreach. They've spoken with our Rotary Club several times. I know that they go out on speaking tours and different things and try to connect with people before they have to connect with people. And I think that that's the important part of that. But I think they've been doing a great job. I think they need more. I think that the police department probably needs more funding so that they can get more positions in schools, the school resource officers. I mean, those are just absolutely marvelous ways of connecting with the youth as they're growing up. And I think every school should have one, from K through 12. It would just be wonderful if all of our schools, if we could afford to do that kind of thing. So that would be something that I'd like to see us be able to do. And they do a great job. I mean, Eden. What can you say about Eden, the golden doodle? It's just a great dog. It's a great opportunity, and it would be great if we could do a little bit more of that. So as far as the police department, I think they do a wonderful job. I think they do a good job professionally, and I think they do a good job in outreach, community outreach.
Councilman Tenney.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Tom, our next question is about economic development. What is your definition of economic development, and how would you define the city's role in this regard? What are this community's strengths and weaknesses, both in terms of business attraction and retention?
Okay, well, economic development, as I as I understand it, the department works with a variety of different partners in the community, as well as part of the general plan process, and identifying the kinds of businesses that we'd like to attract in the community. And in our particular case, we've talked about cybersecurity, high-tech stuff, things of that nature, to try to attract those kinds of uses inside the community. And economic development is tasked with researching the industry, trying to determine what companies may or may not want to expand and relocate, address those companies, talk to them, and become a resource for them, and try to facilitate the resources that company might need, whether the resources be through the Prescott Chamber of Commerce, simple information about the demographics of our city, and also navigating things like, planning process, the building departments, zoning, all those different things. The other thing that they can do is they can coordinate with and facilitate connections with our universities. Our universities, our community colleges, those things, those are all assets and resources that can be brought together and brought to bear. And they have been in the past, too. YC and Ruger is a great example. As far as strengths and weaknesses, strengths, this is a great place to live. What can you say? You're all living here. We all live here. I've lived here for just over 40 years. And I will tell you that, in my opinion, just my opinion only, the feel of this community has not changed in that time frame. I still feel the same way walking around the square that I did 40 years ago. I still feel the same way in doing some of the trails that I did 40 years ago, except there's a lot more of them now, which is a good thing. That's strengths. Recreation, our schools are great assets to our community, and just the beauty of the area. It's a nice place to live. It's a nice place to raise a family. As far as our weaknesses, I think our weakness is shared. One of our main weaknesses, which goes back to the workforce housing issue, one of our main weaknesses is personnel. We have a lot of positions that we're having difficulty filling. And I think that is probably one of our greatest weaknesses. We don't have enough people, and we also have the difficulty of, when we hire police, fire, teachers, that sort of thing, they need to be able to have a wage that they can live on, and we need to be able to have the resources to have them live here. Right now, I lived in Paulden for a few years, and that's where your workforce housing is now. It's all the way out there, and it's traveling back and forth. That's the only place people can really afford to live, the lower income earners. But the folks that are the middle income earners, they're having a difficult time finding places to live here too, and I think that's one of the weaknesses that we have, personnel, and that's shared across the country.
Councilman Moore?
Thank you, Mayor. Morning, Tom.
Morning.
Our next question is regards to the Prescott Regional Airport. Please articulate your understanding of how to protect the growing capacity and operations of the Prescott Regional Airport, and how to balance that with the development in the areas surrounding the airport.
Well, I've been working with that one on the P&Z, as you probably already know. I think that the plan that Dr. Sabota and George Worley have put out is overall a very good plan. There are several different issues that are regarding the safety, in particular the impact zones. Those impact zones have been defined, and they're pretty much the same as they were over this past several years. There are people out there that have developed not only the homes and everything, but also schools and what have you, that have used the lines of those impact zones to be able to design and start to build some of their uses. And that's smart. That's what they did. One of the things that is probably more controversial with the current airport plan is not so much the impact zones as it is the sound, the DNL, day and night sound decibel rating that is averaged out. Wanting to increase that from the current 65, which is the FAA recommendation, to 55 is getting, I would say it's receiving a little pushback, might be putting it mildly. And I think that's something that we need to sit down and engage the stakeholders, not just the developers, but the people that live out there, the businesses that are out there, and engage them in a deliberative process, to try to sit down and figure out what it is we can do. This is what we want to do as a city. These are our goals. What do you need? How can we work together? And how can we achieve some middle ground where we can try to increase the safety of the airport, as well as meeting your needs of, your business needs, your school needs, your educational needs, things like that. I think that going through a process like that would be very beneficial. It'll take longer, but I do believe it would be very beneficial and can probably be done in a few months. So that's my understanding, and that's my recommendation.
Councilman Shishka, you want to ask the
Hey,
question on water and wastewater?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Hey, Tom, thanks for putting yourself out there.
Hey, Steve.
This is about water and wastewater, a subject close to my heart. Please articulate your perspective and understanding as it pertains to the city's current water portfolio and current water policy.
Okay, well, the current portfolio, I mean, basically, you guys don't decide how much water you get to use. That's decided for you by the Arizona Department of Water Resources. So that's number one. And so far, based on the 2009 declaration, the city has, I think it's 24,500 acre feet roughly, made up of 3 different components. And one of the components is groundwater from the wells that we get either at the airport or out in Chino. The other component is effluent, both effluent that we use for golf courses and we ship out to other industries as well. We collect the effluent and we recharge some of it. That's part of it. And also surface water that comes off of the 2 reservoirs that we have, Watson and Willow Lake, all recharging some of that water each year. And then there's the Big Chino. And the Big Chino has just over 8,000 acre feet, is my understanding. The issue here is, what do we do with water? And you have chosen to use water, and wisely, I believe, as a mechanism for channeling growth. I'm not going to say controlling, but channeling growth, getting the kinds of growth that you want in the community, and using water as one of those tools, one of the main tools that you have available to you to be able to do that. Your current water policy is a good one. And we started out when I used to sit up there 20-some odd years ago. We did the same thing you guys are doing. That's a water budget. We had no clue how to do this thing. You know, we had experts telling us what we should and shouldn't do. Your water budget is a good water budget. I mean, so far this year, I don't believe you've even used the first half of what you're supposed to do. With the water that's here, though, and some of the things I mentioned, the Big Chino, based on growth projections that you've had, I think that the growth build-out is someplace in the 80,000 people range. And with that, and with the water that would be required to facilitate that, is, I understand, about 14,500 acre feet, which is less than the 16.5 that you have available without using the Big Chino. So it's potentially, at build-out, you may not need to go to the Big Chino. And I think that that's wise to monitor that so that you know what it is you have to do and where you need to be able to spend the money to grow. I think that answered the question.
Very good. Councilman Montoya?
Thank you, Mayor. Tom, good morning. Thanks for being here. The last question, I should say, is on public infrastructure and demands for service. What do you see as the city's most urgent infrastructure needs and/or service delivery issues?
Well, the biggest infrastructure is always a difficult thing, and the city does, the Public Works Department in particular with utilities and roadways, does a pretty good job of outlining the different programs and the different projects that need to be taken care of each year in their budget process. The repairing and the replacing of 80-year-old sewer lines, 80-year-old water lines. I remember when we did the downtown, there were some water lines there that no longer existed between the meter and the building. They were basically holes in the dirt. And that's how old some of this stuff is. And that needs to be replaced. And it would be nice to have more money to be able to do it more quickly, but we have what we have, and we have to work within the budget. And I think Public Works does a great job at being able to prioritize where to work and when to work. And they also give themselves a little bit of time for a little bit extra for emergencies. The same can be said for roadways. Keeping up with roadways, the surfaces of roadways, is a constant challenge. And it's something that, again, I think Public Works does a pretty good job at being able to identify the status of roads, what roads need to be done, when they need to be done, and including them in their budget and moving those things along. In an ideal world, we could be like Disneyland and be able to have all the money we need to be able to go out and make every road nice and smooth, but we just don't have the money for that right now. And prioritizing it the way they do, I think, is excellent. The most critical, again, I mentioned it again, I think one of the most critical infrastructure and demands for service that we have is personnel. I think that, filling the positions that we already have open is something that's a challenge. and we need to be able to address that challenge. We need to try to work at the challenge by identifying those things that people need to have, making sure that what we're doing with either police, fire, maintenance, whatever the workers are, that we can pay them a decent wage in order for them to be able to live at least near the community, if not within it itself. So I think doing that for two reasons. One is going to be housing issues and pay. The other issue is just getting the folks here to apply. I mean, that's also a challenge. And that's not just the city of Prescott. That's everywhere. My business, when I was in business, that was a constant thing that we had to deal with, was getting the right people in the right place at the right time. Some of the things that delivery issues that as you begin to grow, more to the north, of course, is where you're going to be growing. Issues such as, satellite facilities, maybe a satellite police department might be looked at. Looked at one point at a satellite library out in that area. Those are things that should be on the agenda to at least consider. And fire stations. The response time for fire is the more we grow out in that area, the response times are increasing, and that's not something you want to have happen down there for the public health and safety. So those are the things that I see as the infrastructure, demands of service. As far as the structure of what you guys are doing with development services and things like that, I mean, I think you're doing a good job. I think the city does a good job there. The department heads are doing well. There's nothing out there that strikes me in my research as being a major, oh my gosh, we got to fix this. It's going along fairly well, and you're staying on top of it. And I think I'd like to help with that, too.
Thank you, Tom. Well, you have about 10 minutes left, so
Well, I'm nervous and
few
talk fast.
additional questions we could ask. So regarding environmental protection and open space, what are this area's most pressing environmental issues? How would you rate the city's performance in terms of environmental open space protection? And in your opinion, is it the city's responsibility to provide open space and trails for the entire region?
Okay, environmental impacts. I am not aware of any environmental crises other than maybe, the water well thing that just came up recently that needs to be addressed. That clearly needs to be addressed. But I'm not aware of any crises that are happening with any of the lands or levels of pollution are problematic for both reservoirs. There's no question about that. And that's not an easy nor cheap fix for that. We have quite a bit of areas that we have as open space. The city has done a very good job, I think, of acquiring open space. The recent Storm Ranch was a godsend, I think. Again, 20 years ago, they looked at building a hotel there after we bought the lakes and everything. And that was exactly. That was one of those things like, oh my God, I don't want that to happen. That's when Steiger was mayor. Never mind. So I think that, the purchasing of open space, there's always those who want more, and there are those who are satisfied with where we're at, and there's those who think the money should be spent on something else. So your job, the council's job, is to weigh in between that. Sift it through your filters and see where it comes out. As far as assets that we have in the area, I mean, our trail system is great. Should we be building trails outside the city limits? Not necessarily. I think that you can work, and the city does work, with Prescott National Forest, and they do work, and I volunteer with both. I volunteer with the Prescott National Forest and with the city to do trail maintenance and construction. And that's something that I think is important. Do I think you're required to do that outside the city? No. But do I think that... I think that's the meaning of your question. If you're questioning whether or not we should let people who live outside the city enjoy our trails, my answer is absolutely. Absolutely, we need to do that. We need to get more and more with people than without them.
Anybody have any additional questions that you'd like to present to Tom? Councilman Montoya.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. So there's a question here about transparency in government in the sunshine. Do you feel the city is transparent and open in terms of the manner in which it conducts its business? If not, why not? And what would you do to change this?
Well, I touched on and answered that a little bit earlier. Do I think that you're transparent? For the most part, yes. Do I think that there are some issues that require more transparency? Yes. Airport is one. And Mayor Pro Tem Rusing had talked about the recent water system upgrade, and that, I think your quote was, I'm wondering if we sidestep something here. And I think that's it's a good perspective to have, and I think that's worthwhile. I think that there are some things like the airport where I think we need to engage the stakeholders in that area perhaps a little bit more directly, and that kind of a thing. And how would I improve things? There needs to be minor improvements, minor tweaking, but the process of deliberation is one that has worked very, very well over the years, where people get together, all sides get together, and they talk about what their needs are, they talk about what their needs could be, what they don't want to have happen, what they do want to have happen. And through the deliberation process, you can come up with solutions almost all the time to try to make sure that not everybody gets what they want, but everybody gets what they get an understanding and need. The other thing for transparency is that the role of a council person, mayor and council, should be outreach, educating the public as you go through the day-to-day things that are coming, the different projects that come your way, the different concerns that come your way, taking the time to try to educate the public as much as you can. And I think that's one of the jobs that a council person needs to do.
Councilman Tenney, do you have another question?
I was just pointing out that Councilman Montoya did, but I'd be happy to follow up with another.
A few more minutes.
If that's all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Tell us a little bit, you touched on with trails and other areas, regional cooperation. Tell us your thoughts about that. What are your impressions of our current level of success with regional cooperation, and what are some of the areas of emphasis going forward that you'd like to see regarding regional cooperation?
Well, I think that, the city of Prescott, of course, does not live in a cocoon, and so it's affected by, you're affected by growth in Prescott Valley, Dewey Humboldt, excuse me, and Yavapai County. I mean, all those things affect you, and all the cars on the road that we see in the traffic that we cuss out at the traffic light, those aren't all city cars. They're from all over the place, and I think that there should be more regional cooperation looked at growth issues, smart growth and how growth should be happening. And I think that starts at the leadership, and I think that starts with all of you. There used to be a time when the mayors would get together, and once every quarter they would get together and have a lunch and kind of talk back and forth on certain things. And then, frankly, Sam Steiger happened, and that no longer took place. But getting the mayors together, getting council people together with other contemporaries in the different locations, I think is a good start to start doing that, to start agendize issues and address them and have regular meetings with the idea that you're there to try to help. You're there to try to work together.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
You have a question?
Thank you. Your application didn't include a letter or curriculum vitae or a resume, and I'm just curious about what years you were a council member and what were your achievements or issues or controversies.
Okay, well, I don't like spitting on a griddle too much, but what I would say is that I was a councilman from 1997. I was appointed. I've been through this process before. I was appointed to fill a term, and then I ran for council, and I was elected to a 4-year term. I don't plan on running this time. Things that we did. I engaged with neighborhood groups. There was a thing that we did then. It was called the neighborhood system. We would go by and identify various neighborhoods. We would contact some of the leaders in those neighborhoods, usually by the block watch, those kinds of groups. We would start there. And we start to identify what some of the issues were in the neighborhoods that people were concerned about. And we try to see whether or not we could do something to address those issues. Most of the time, it was something pretty simple, like more drive-bys by the police department, simple things like that. But getting people to understand what the different neighborhoods wanted, that was a thing that worked out very, very well. And we did that quite clearly. One of the things that we did on that was the Sierra Pete's Drive and Doherty Street. At that time, the Sierra Pete's people wanted, the Forest Trails people wanted to connect to Doherty Drive. Doherty Drive people did not want them there at all. Did not want any connection, did not want anything. So we went for about 2 months. We got the two sides together, brought them together, went through the deliberative process, and we we ended up presenting to council. The side from Doherty Street presented the issues from Forest Trails people, and the Forest Trails people did the Doherty Street, and we came up with what's there now, which is a paved roadway that can be used in times of emergency for egress and things like that. So that was something that started out as being a heck no, we don't want anything to do with this, to okay, we understand now. You've educated us, we see the issues, and we know how it can move forward.
Well, thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
I know you put a lot of time and effort into these responses, and certainly appreciate your applying here, and we'll be doing our evaluations here shortly, so thank you very much. And we'll
Do I need to leave,
entertain
or
Steve Schmidt.
do I need to leave, or like the question before?
Public meeting, you can hang out.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Martha's bringing.
I don't know, I got a bunch of sheets here.
So you'll be first up there, Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. Welcome, Mr. Schmidt. I appreciate you coming. I appreciate your interest and your application for this position. We're going to do kind of a round robin here with each member of the council being able to ask a question that you've already been given, so you can prepare your comments and present those to us. So we'll start off with Mayor Pro Tem.
Good morning.
Good morning.
The first question is about growth and development. Prescott is a growing city facing issues related to available workforce housing. Please speak to your knowledge of the concept of smart, managed growth and workforce housing and how these concepts can be applied to our community.
Thank you very much. I was looking, I'm glad I got these questions in advance because it gave me time to sit there and think about this for a little bit. Smart growth, I'm a little bit familiar with that from previous life experience, but I think it's a great opportunity to protect our health and our natural environment and make the communities a lot more attractive, economically stronger, and socially diverse. I think that some of the creative strategies that we could use would be reinvesting in already existing infrastructure, rehabilitating other historical buildings, and we could design neighborhoods that have shops and things nearby. Also, by having these smart communities in place, also reduces the carbon footprint. That helps. It also helps with the congestion of traffic. It doesn't eliminate it all, but it also helps with our aged areas that we have here, with over 30% of the population being over 65. That helps them in those communities, that they can stay in those particular areas. But I think it also helps in having communities for the workforce, knowing how the way the current environment is, the way the current inflation has really hit the housing market around here. It would help to have the affordable housing as well, especially for our first responders, our teachers, people who can't afford to buy the house, where we could have things of repurposing some of the land that we have, also being able to help awareness. I think helping with that, bringing the public into this, like putting together ad hoc teams or tiger teams to get the community at large to help us out, would be a great asset in developing the smart growth and also the workforce housing. That's housing is really tough. I've gotten that based on my time at Emory-Riddle. They have problems with the teachers. Yavapai had that same problem, Yavapai College. I've also had a lot of talks with our first responders, the police force, as well as the fire department, who love the community, but they can't afford to be in this area. It's requiring them to go further and further out in their travel, so their travel to work of having to live in remote locations where they can afford it. So I think there's opportunity to take some vacant land or unutilized areas and develop this type of housing to help the community in not only the near term but the long term as well.
Thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
Thank you. So my question is regarding public safety issues. As you probably know, there's a number of current societal challenges. For example, it says, I think we meant e.g. social unrest, community distrust, etc., facing law enforcement entities throughout our country. As such, how would you suggest here locally, the city, and more specifically our police department, address these types of challenges?
Thank you for the question. I've got a soft spot in my heart for first responders and military. And at one time, I did have some of the police force, and I had some fire people work for me in my previous career. So I think the city's done very well so far. You've got the Citizens Academy that tells about all of the different activities and how the city works. You've also got the Citizens Police Academy, in which my wife's attended both of those. Are very good. She recommends them to the whole, to everybody. I think having things like Coffee with Cops would help out a lot too. And what we have done, we've had what we have is an annual barbecue, and we invite the police department, the SWAT, and fire departments to our house. So we've gotten to meet and know Amy Bonney. We've also gotten to know Holger Durr, who was previous to that was Dennis Light. I knew Dennis from his time when he was in the Air Force. So I've got some ties there. So we have this barbecue, and we bring in our neighbors. We've had local and county representatives come to our house. We've invited that. We've encouraged that throughout the neighborhood. It's been a fabulous experience to get to know these people on a personal basis instead of just on a professional basis. And it's really interesting when we have it. It does bring up quite a bit of questions in the neighborhood when our cul-de-sac is full of police vehicles and fire trucks. And but on the other hand, it's the safest place in the city at that point. So I know I'm safe with those guys around. But it's I think finding ways to be able to have the community at large be able to see these people as individuals instead of as cops. It's a two-way street. It works both directions. You know, they are that thin veneer between civility and chaos. And they're very important to the community and everybody here, and they risk their lives on a daily basis to save us from ourselves. So I think that continuing that on with the education part of it, social media, having other types of individual events. So you don't always not necessarily see them in uniform, but when they're not in uniform. And they're here they're law enforcement. They don't make the laws, they don't make the codes, they enforce them, and they stand up to do that. So they are that, like I say, that thin veneer of safety in this county.
Thank you, Steve. Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. Morning, Steve.
Morning.
Next question is on economic development. What is your definition of economic development, and how would you define the city's role in this regard? And what are this community's strengths and weaknesses in terms of both business attraction and retention?
Thank you very much. My definition is to influence the direction of private and government sectors in investing in this community. for a positive economic environment, but also by doing that, removing as many roadblocks as we possibly can to allow that to continue. I think the city's role is to make it friendly toward businesses as possible, and as a result, better jobs will be available. So this way we could attract other existing businesses to the community as well. As some of the major roles I see are business retention and expansion, business creation of businesses. I've got ideas on that too, and providing an infrastructure for various services, like transportation, communication, human interactions, water, sanitation services, things of that nature. And when I was looking at strengths and weaknesses, when I look at things, I don't look at them as weaknesses. I look at them as opportunities for improvement, more of opportunities, not weaknesses, but opportunities. I don't think you really have any strong weaknesses. You may have one or two, and I didn't see them, but I think they're great opportunities for advancement. So, some of the strengths I see is brand name recognition. You've got a niche market here. You've got the world's oldest rodeo. You look at its storied history. It's a fabulous place, and you want to hang on to that legacy that's here. So, and it's a great attraction for outside people. It's like when the rodeo's here, you're gross about double the size, and try to find a hotel room within 20 miles of anything but that's a good thing. Look at all the revenue that's bringing in to all the businesses at large. So I think that's great. And the other thing, one of the reasons I came here is not that, but the weather is great here. You got 4 seasons. Where I came from, there were 2 seasons, hot and cold, and windy. So that was it. But no, you've got great weather. You've got great communication with the other municipalities in the local area. I can see you're all now working together for the bigger good and the larger objective to get things done. And then I think the low cost of wages here, the low cost is an attractive feature. It's plus and a negative in that respect. But I think some of the opportunities is the education. I'm working as an ex officio on this committee my wife chairs for airframe and propulsion. 2-year degree that would bring. We've got all the airplanes. Amarillo's got 40 airplanes, buying 16 more. You've got a lot of general aviation, you've got all these other types of activities, but you don't have anybody here that can repair them. So they have to mobilize it. And they may or may not show up. But I see that as a separate industry. I see that as also another educational element to bring high-paying jobs here. A good A&P mechanic can make up to $100K a year in that type of activity. So, but I think traffic, we're growing. Traffic becomes an issue at certain times, and then also, we got air service, but it's limited. I think we could potentially increase on that, and then the limited housing is another big issue. So, I see those kinds of the things of opportunities, not weaknesses. I think those are opportunities.
That's probably a good segue into Councilman Shishka's next question regarding the Prescott Regional Airport.
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. It's good to put a face with a name.
Well, or bad.
So could you please articulate your understanding of how to protect the growing capacity and operations of the Prescott Regional Airport and how to balance that with the development in the area surrounding the airport?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I spent quite a bit of time on that from working on Air Force Plant 42, which was an issue of encroachment, where you have land uses that are not compatible with each other, and where you have residential, schools, churches, high-density type thing around an airport. It's also the growth of the airport and the expansion of the runway is a good thing, and it brings in additional commerce. You can have larger airplanes associated with that, and to help with that, like I said, in that A&P type thing, if you had that ability there, you could serve the other 15 regional airports in the local area by having them just fly here and then go home for an hour and a half, and then call me up when my airplane's here, instead of having to go to Phoenix or some of the larger places to get that type of activity done. So it's one of the things of trying to maintain financial sustainability, social sustainability, environmental, and aviation-related issues. So those are some of the things that are getting it, and the encroachment part can have problems. I've got quite a bit of flying time, and the worst part of a flight is takeoff and landing. It's not the flight, it's a takeoff and landing. And it's not a matter if, it's a matter of when. Because it's just you just can't pull it over like you can a car, where if it got a flat tire, you just pull it over. It's the safety. So what we did is we got the land on the approach and takeoff ends. One end was all agriculture on the approach end. Normally, it depends if the wind was coming out of the east or not. And the other one was industrial. And so, but not high density type things. Also, we had to worry about noise abatement. That was another issue of having what directions the airplanes do, and then, you know, with the noise, we got plenty of calls, flying in military airplanes, we kind of tell them, well, it's the sound of freedom. But, yeah, we'd have to deal with that. And I think the community effort in that, asking them for their help on what they think and where that goes, I think would be of great benefit of that. And then seeing how all this feasibility works out in trying to maintain the airport, continue its growth, which is that area is a prime area for growth and in industry. And I can see some other industries having a potential to move in there. And then I could just see having, for example, like the A&P, you might get people coming here from Phoenix to get their airplanes worked on, and they may go, well, this is a great place. Maybe we ought to consider expanding our businesses to this area. So I think there's a lot of potential there. And there's also, we have to look at it, having an airport around, having general aviation, having commercial business is a wonderful thing. But we've got to keep an eye on the surrounding area and what occurs, and to make it safe for everybody that's here and beneficial at the same time.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning.
The next question we're going to ask you about is water and wastewater. Please articulate your perspective and understanding as it pertains to the city's current water portfolio and current water policy.
Okay. Looking at the city's portfolio, you have Watson and Willow reservoirs, and you have 6 wells in Chino Valley. You got 2 near the airport that you just put in that are for existing and future needs. And then you have the Big Chino Water Ranch, which is north of here. That used to be the JWK Ranch that was managed by John Olson. But and then you've got all the storage tanks and 500 miles of line and 12,000 valves and pretty complex system. But I think, and so it's looking there. I know that the Big Chino Water Ranch, there's also some issues of, I know you've got a 54-46% split between Prescott and Prescott Valley. And then I saw the future potential water line to be able to tap into that. And but it's kind of costly. I think I looked at it, 100 mil for our portion of it, which would be there. And then there's also the issues of the Verde River being at the head of that, of issues that you got to worry about that. But I think from the policy, I think public education programs and helping with drought-resistant plants, AstroTurf, and then setting up the various venues in that and educating them. Also, new construction, having water safety type of activities, like put your hand underneath, it turns on, so you don't have continuous running water, flow heads being reduced a little bit, the water-saving fixtures and appliances, using reclaimed water, affluent water, and then putting back into the aquifer, 65% putting back into that. That's great. Water in the future, it's becoming what I view as the next gold standard. Water's tough everywhere, and you look at the Colorado. I've spent plenty of time at Lake Powell and Meade, and been at the dams and seen the rise in the flow of the water, and it's created a lot of other situations in there. So it's good for the water here, but we also need to be present of the water, because if those hydropower systems don't work, we're going to have some bigger problems as well. So it's a very complex, multifaceted type of issue. There's not just one solution to a problem. And I think there's all kinds of opportunities that you're already doing. You're also maintaining with the environmental quality. I know the rodeo's doing their part to help alleviate all the leaks we've had. We've gone through and replaced some of the water lines and things of that nature, so that we can ensure that that works properly too. So.
Thanks, Dee. The next question relates to public infrastructure and demands for service. What do you see as the city's most urgent infrastructure needs and/or service delivery issues?
I see what the questions that you presented, I think, are really the top issues that are keeping you awake at night. That's what I see. And so, between the water, traffic, noise, light, air quality, land use planning, economic development, energy production, it's like there's potential here for solar and wind farms, perhaps, to help with alleviate that, to help with the power and issues. Like I said, when I was talking about the dams or hydroelectric, here's opportunity to do some self-generating, kind of incentivize some of the businesses to have their own power source, and I think so. So it's not another not easy solution. It's an iterative process that's going to take some time to develop and put into place.
Well, we have a couple of extra minutes. Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any additional questions for Mr. Schmidt?
Yes, I was going to ask him about the budget and finance. Explain what account funding is and how it differs from accounting practices in the private sector, and describe the two retirement systems the city participates in on behalf of its employees, and expound upon your understanding of the fiscal health of these two systems.
Yeah, it's
the last one.
Yeah, it was the last one, right? Yeah. Searching through all this.
You might want to clarify.
So you have two retirement systems. One's a public safety personnel retirement system, and the other one's the Arizona State Retirement System. And I know there's two others. One's for elected officials, and another one is for correction officers. So, knowing that there was is a shortage but it seems to be on the recovery part for the public service one. Noticing what the budget is for that was 16 million. It's 8 million, and then hopefully, I think the assessment is hopefully it's paid down by the end of this year. Therefore, reducing the general tax by 0.75%, which I think is a wonderful thing because it tells you that the community is involved in that, and I think that helps. It's also their contribution plans to be able to do that. Both of them have benefit plans or contribution plans that the city pays into, as well as the contributor, the member of that as well. But it's both of them. I saw deficits in both, but like with ASRS, they're paying out like 72 cents on a dollar that they take. So that's telling me that their outgoing is less than what they're taking in. So they're helping to reduce that deficit that they had in that particular area. So as far as the different budgetings from the city, if you will, government versus private, the city is using it for accountability rather than profitability, because you're a government entity, you're not supposed to be in the profit-making line of business. And then from a business standpoint, they use a general ledger that defines their assets, liabilities, revenue, expenses, capital gains, things of that nature. So they have a lot more leeway than the government does, because we're not in a profit-making type situation. So being in the government most of my life, I realize that. I know what some of the things are that are involved with business practices and balancing and clean opinions and getting all that activity involved. So yeah, I'm familiar with that and what you need to do and what the differences are, and then it's crucial. I applaud you for making sure that our public safety people are taken care of in their future. So it's really good to know. So again, like I say, I've got a soft spot in my heart for first responders and military. I really do. So,
Thank you.
Does anyone have any additional questions? Councilman Shishka, any additional questions you'd like to ask Mr. Schmidt?
No, Mayor, I don't.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate your time and interest in this position. And
great to be part of this community. This is great. I love this place.
I'm glad that you decided to step up and volunteer for this, and I'm sure you'll continue to be involved with the city as the
if I may,
situation develops.
If I may, would it be appropriate to give the council a copy of my resume so you can have a little bit of understanding what my background is?
Sure.
Several copies. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I appreciate it. So I think at this point, if we have any questions or comments from the audience, do you have any blue cards?
I haven't received any. Did anyone want to address council regarding the applicants? Nope.
No? Well, I will say that we've got some pretty impressive people that have applied for this position, and I think it's absolutely critical, in my opinion, that since this is a 15-month appointment until the next city election, and considering the importance of a number of the issues that we will be voting on here in the very near future, it's particularly important that we have an appointed council member that's very, very up to speed on all these various issues that have such a high degree of impact on the community. So I think I've made this comment before. I don't think this is the time to bring somebody in to have to have a lot of time to study and get up to speed on a lot of these issues. It's important we have somebody who is able to accept the appointment and be able to have a very strong fundamental understanding of many of these critical issues we'll be deciding on. So with that said, I think we're at the point here where we can entertain a motion for appointment.
Should we have some council discussion first, do you believe, or not?
Yeah, I think we can kick that around for a few minutes.
Okay.
Councilman Tenney, do you want to start it off?
Sure, yeah. I'll follow your excellent comments, Mayor. I appreciate that. I agree with you that given the short time frame that we're looking at, really under any circumstances, it's best if there's somebody who's ready to go, but especially given the relatively short time frame for the term that we're looking at, it's important that we focus on someone who's got the background knowledge here. I will also echo, not to be redundant, but I think it's important the public know that I think we received 22 applications overall. Nearly all of them were just outstanding. I am just so impressed, and I think we talked about this in our executive session as well, so impressed with the caliber of folks in our community and those who have stepped up to put their names in for this. So that's really a very impressive thing. It's a great comment on our community and each of the people who who have put themselves forward. Mayor, given what you said, I agree with you that we need somebody who's most ready in terms of background with Prescott, et cetera, to step in. I think both Connie and Tom fit that bill fairly well. I'd not met Tom prior to this morning. I was pretty impressed with his pragmatism and optimism and how well informed he was and his broad base of knowledge on things. It's been several years, but his former service on the council, I think, would also be something that would help him, as you say, hit the ground running. I think we'd be well served really by any of the folks who have applied, and certainly by the three finalists we've chosen, but he'd probably be my top choice at this point.
And I want to add that also to your comments, the number of applications we had. I know when we were reviewing those applications, it was pretty clear there were some really people that would make great candidates for the next election. So I would encourage a lot of those people to think about that. That's about a year from now will be the primary, and then the general election in November. So I think there are some really quality people that might consider running for that office. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all the applicants and all the finalists for all the effort that you put in to go through this process. To me, something that we need to look at with the finalists is commitment, because this is a big commitment. And to me, it should be more than just short term, 15 months. We have a finalist who's willing to not only to commit to finishing Ms. Hall's term, but also committed to running to continue on for another 4 years. Because if we don't have that commitment, then we're looking at onboarding another new person in next year. So as far as I'm concerned, I think Connie Contalme is someone that I would certainly support.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. I will just say that the comments that you and Clark made are my feelings too. We had a ton of really qualified applicants in the process, and that was great to see. I recall when the appointment came up for Billy Orr's seat, I was one of those applicants that didn't make it to this process. So I would say that if you didn't make it to this process, or even if you don't go through, that there's still a place at the table for you to engage in serving your community. Certainly, I'm a testament to that, I hope. I would say the thing that sticks to me is someone who is really engaged and has looked at these issues really thoroughly and been thoughtful about it. I think both Tom and Connie really kind of come to the top for me, particularly because they're engaged and they've been around the community for years. I've known both of them for a number of years at this point. I really liked some of the unique ideas that Connie presented in terms of how to deal directly with some of the impasses that we're at with some of the issues, particularly around, the airport issue. That is a big issue. It's for those of you who have seen the P&Z packet, there is, as Mr. Riley pointed out, there's a lot of engagement on that. And, Connie has some background to really come to the table and present new ideas. I think that would serve us well. And so for me, that makes her kind of rise to the top for me.
Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an interesting experience. Obviously, we went through this process just a year ago, and I was also one of those finalists. I applied last year to fill Billy Orr's seat, and I was one of the top five finalists and had the opportunity to be interviewed and was present when Clark was selected and chosen, and I think the council made an excellent choice. But like Brandon, chose to run. So I appreciate the mayor's encouragement to all these applicants that if you don't succeed at first, try again, right? I appreciate Steve coming today and his interest in getting involved in our city's politics and the issues that face our city, but I do feel strongly that our top two candidates are definitely Tom and Connie. I think we need people who have been in the community for a long period of time, have a background and more experience with the city of Prescott. I personally feel that in listening to Tom, not just today, but also on the radio, listening to his perspective on particularly the airport issue that is a very pressing issue, I think it's fair to say publicly that many of our executive sessions, without revealing the content of the material that we discussed, but they're airport related. The airport has truly become probably the most pressing issue for our council that we're dealing with ever since I came into office, and that's almost been a year already. There probably isn't a week where we haven't had an executive session where the airport has not been on the agenda in an executive session. It's difficult. And I really appreciate Tom's perspective on the airport issues, and I appreciate his service on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And I feel like I align myself a little more personally with Tom's perspective on how to address the airport, that we need more deliberation, that we need to reach out to stakeholders more, we need to work more collaboratively with the different stakeholders on this airport issue. So at this point, my personal feeling is I'm leaning more towards Tom.
Mr. Shishka.
Mayor Pro Tem.
No.
By the way, Councilman Shishka, do you have any comments?
Yeah, I do. A couple of comments, Mayor. Thanks. Number one is, I know that the Mayor Pro Tem talked about having to onboard new people. Well, I have to tell her that onboarding new people is what we've been doing for a long time. Basically, we are all new people. The mayor was a new person. Mayor Pro Tem, you certainly were a new person. Everybody up there was a new person at one time. We all had to find the bathroom. And, I think that, from the standpoint of that being a qualifier or a non-qualifier, to me, doesn't really matter. But what I thought was that Tom was a lot more positive about the future and about, what our limitations are as a city. I mean, when Connie was talking, it was like money magically appears. And it just doesn't. And so while I really appreciate Connie's coming back and trying this again, and I would love to see her try again as a candidate, I have to say that I think that Tom, as of now, is the most qualified person to continue on until the next election. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you for all the input. One thing I'd like to make out of respect, just would like to say that I'm still supporting Connie. She seems to have the depth of knowledge and the willingness to bring people together and negotiate over all of our thorny issues, the airport being one. And frankly, I'm still in the dark about Tom's accomplishments and what the issues were when he was on council for 5 years. He brought up a issue of a kind of a neighborhood, kind of a spat. But after 5 years, I was expecting something a little more exciting. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments, concerns?
Just really briefly, I want to make clear that they're kind of 1A and 1B as far as I'm concerned. I think we'd be very well served by either one. And if there are strong feelings on the council, one direction, I'm certainly very, very happy to support either candidate. I think they'd both be excellent and hit the ground running, like you say, and we'd get some good thoughts and participation from them.
Councilman Montoya.
I have
would
my
just-
light on.
Go ahead.
I have my light on. I don't know if you're. I'm sorry.
I don't see it.
One more.
My apologies. I kind of want to take a different perspective of Kathy as far as a candidate who's willing to run versus a candidate who's not willing to run. I think as a council, there was a lot of negativity in the community regarding last year's process. You may recall there was a lot of pushback that people didn't like the fact that we were going to be appointing somebody for 33 months, that an elected official should be chosen by the public, not by the city council. I like the fact that we have a candidate who's willing to just fill in the rest of this term and then allow the community to decide who they want to represent them. He's not saying, I want to, continue to be on the city council for an indefinite period of time. I'm willing to step up because of my experience having previously been on the city council, being on the current planning and zoning committee right now, dealing with these airport issues, but I'm willing to step aside after 15 months. I just want to fill the gap until the next election and then allow the community to decide who they want to represent them. Thank you.
Councilman Montoya.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to, I'll throw my opinion into the mix between Eric and Kathy there, that I could take it either way. I mean, for me, I think if someone's willing to run, that's great. If they're not, that's great too. For me, throughout this entire process, that hasn't been a determining factor. I think the single biggest determining factor for me has always been, is this person willing and able to step up and do the job right away? I think in Tom and Connie, I would echo Councilman Tenney's remarks. I think we have, two very qualified people, and I think we'd be well served by them both. I think for me, I would take a little bit of exception to Councilman Sichka's comments about, I didn't necessarily hear Connie doom and gloom, I guess. She was not lacking optimism in her approach to this. I would say that she's clear-eyed about it. I think, and again, I come back, as Councilman Moore did, to the issue of the airport. And I think, frankly, likely that, it is going to take outreach and communication from the city as we navigate the AVO. That's clear. And we're already getting that input back from members of the community, and I think that's great. I think Tom has the right approach about that. But I think the other part of this is that we have some serious stakeholders that we're going to have to sit down at a table with. And I think that what I appreciated about Connie's presentation was that she identified that, and she said, what are the places we can move to make this more palatable so that we can move forward? And to me, that's what good governance is, by the way, is sitting down at the table with people that you have strong disagreements with or other disagreements with, and finding a way forward. So I guess for me, again, to echo Councilman Tenney's point of view, I like Tom and Connie both. I almost, it would be great if we had two seats, but we only have one. And so for me, again, I just come back to Connie's perspective on the airport a little bit.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to just bring a different perspective to the table here. In this day and age, 2022, what are the optics like to have a 7-member council and only one female. Does that really reflect the population in our community? So we're replacing a woman with another man, and I just don't think that. Think Connie is just as qualified as Mr. Riley, but we have to look at, what does our population look like? And shouldn't our council be a little more balanced? Because I think it would be very sad to be the only woman on this council out of 7 positions. Thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
I appreciate that comment a lot, and it resonates with me to a certain extent. I will say I'm much more concerned about a person's qualifications than their gender, or about and what they bring to the table than the optics. It looks nice to have a couple of men up here and 5 women, or a couple of women and 5 men. If there's the more balance there is, the better in many respects. But I'm looking more for background and ability. And I think in both cases we've got a gentleman and a lady who both would do a terrific job, and that's what it's about for me. Not about trying to achieve gender balance in one way or another.
Thank you. Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councilmember Tenney kind of already expressed my thoughts, but this is not about gender. This is about qualifications and experience. Having that attitude reminds me of this woke mentality and the CRT mentality in our communities, in our nation, pardon me. I don't see that too much in our community, thank heavens. But I think both candidates are very qualified, I admit. But I don't think we should be making our decision based on gender. It should be based on what they bring to the table, their background, their experience, their knowledge, their passion, their approach. And I still feel, of the 2 candidates, I'm personally a little more aligned with Tom Riley's presentation today, even though I do feel Connie would also do a very good job.
Well, we're certainly going to have to make a decision here, so I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we appoint Connie Cantelme to the open position on the City Council.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Councilman Sischka?
No.
So we have a 5-1 vote. It's passes by a majority, but I don't know if there's a consensus for wanting a unanimous vote. I'll let the city attorney address that.
I don't know if there's a desire to, but the requirement is only that it passes by a majority, so I think we can leave it at that.
Okay. So passes 5-1.
Congratulations, Connie Cantelme, and welcome to the City Council. And Mr. Riley, I want to tell you this was a tough call. Obviously, your experience and commitment to the city is very impressive, and we hope that you'll continue to offer your expertise and advice and support on the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Mayor, can I just echo one? It was a difficult decision, but Tom, I'm very grateful for the fact that you will continue to be on P&Z. I've always been impressed with your caliber there and the questions you ask. So thank you for your service and your willingness to step up.
My wife will be happy with your decision. I get to go on vacation.
All right. Well, this workshop is adjourned, and then we'll reconvene with a study session at 1 o'clock.